Welcome y'all to an iRacing tutorial video. Today I wanted to talk about replays. I've noticed a lot of reoccurring questions about replays. In this video today I hope to answer some of these questions and more. It'll be a fairly decent look at replays, but not an end-all be-all guide to replays. I will put a time index of the topics in the description below so you can jump to any particular part that you may have a specific question about. Let's start with the TLDR. To save a replay, you click here, you click the disk, you hit save, done. To load the replay, you go to the website, you go to My Replays under Results and Stats, find the replay you want and just click on the file name. Now for the longer explanation. First, let's start by how to save a replay and a few other different options related to replays. To save a replay, simply click on the wrench and hammer icon, and then the floppy disk icon, and that'll bring up the Save Replay dialog. You can rename the file or leave it as its default. The file name really doesn't matter except for two things. First, if you're going to be looking at these files using something like Windows Explorer outside of the iRacing website, changing the name will make it easier to know which file is which. As you can see, I have a bit of a naming scheme going for mine already. And the second one is this is the only place you can put some custom information about a replay that will show up on the iRacing website. So we'll just leave it as the default, which is the date. Great, now we've saved our replay. Saving a replay this way will save the entire session up to the point where you hit the save button, with some caveats that we'll discuss later. What if you only want to save part of the replay? Well, that's where this little scissor icon here comes into play. What the scissor icon button does is it sets the starting point of the clip. So if we were to go to a point in time where the car is moving, go to the start of this lap, and then we click here, you can see it sets the mark there, and then we can go forward a little bit, fast forward until we finish the lap. And then when we hit save, it will only get the time between the mark that we set at 5:41 and the current time at 6:09. And then we can save that. If we want to reset it so that we have the whole thing again, just click this little button here and it'll dismiss the set points. So the things that will be saved as part of the replay is your car's position and inputs and other cars' positions, as well as by default the voice chat. However, it will not save any of the text chat information. It also will not actually replay any of the text chat for like incidents and contacts. So if there's any text chat information you want to get, you need to take screenshots before you exit the session because it will be lost after that. The next question is, where does iRacing save these files? It will be under Your Documents, iRacing, Replay, as we can see here. I will have a quick link in the description below on using a Windows environment variable and the rest of the path so that you can just open a Windows Explorer and paste that in and it'll take you there. Now that you know how to save a replay, let's quickly talk about some options that you might want to consider changing. The first and most important one is under the Graphics tab. Max Cars, this one right here. I'll do the mouse over so you can read that, but as just a quick summary, this setting controls how many cars your client is requesting updates from the server, as well as it controls the number of cars shown during a race. So this can do a few different things, like if you have a bad internet connection, this can help lower the overall bandwidth that your sim needs to be able to communicate with the server, as well as lowering the load on your graphics card because there's less cars to render. The other side effect of this is that it also lowers the amount of cars that are saved in the replay. Since you weren't getting updates for them, your local sim never knew about the cars, so it has nothing to save for those cars. This also lowers the size of a replay for a given amount of time, because there's less data to be saved off. So the downside to turning this number down is you will not be able to see those cars that you didn't save in the first place. Even if you adjust that max cars up, the data's gone. So if you want to get the max number of cars, you need to crank this number up. Otherwise, the lower the number, the only cars it'll show you are the ones closer to you in the race. It tries to be smart about showing you which cars it needs to show you because the ones that are closer, you're going to be much more relevant to your race than the ones that are on the other side of the track. The next couple of options are under the Replay tab. The first one being Enable Replay Spooling. Enable Replay Spooling will allow the sim to write the temporary replay file to your hard drive instead of just trying to keep it in memory. This allows for a much larger replay file to be made, which would be limited by your hard drive space. By default, in-memory is limited to 1 gig. If you really want, you can edit the size limit in your App.ini file. How to edit your App.ini file is outside of the scope of this video. And as just a note, in all the races I've run and done, I've only had one replay file that was over 1 gig. And that was the Reddit iRacing League Death Bowl race, which was over an hour with a pretty good amount of cars all smashing into each other. Outside of big fields and endurance races, this probably won't be that important to set. It will also matter a lot if you want to save practice sessions, like the Skip Barber Racing Group practice sessions. It's really useful to have this set because there's a lot of cars and it goes on for 2 hours, so those are really big replay files. If you're also concerned that all the replays will trash your SSD, there's also another option in your App.ini file which allows you to specify what directory to write this temporary file to. There are a few other kind of random options in the App.ini file that should be fairly self-explanatory from the comments next to them. However, there's one called ReplayPatchRemoteCars, which is enabled by default. This makes the sim update the replay with the car position from the server. What that means is that when you watch a replay with this setting enabled, it will show you where the server thinks all the cars are positioned. Fortunately, I had a race I did recently which has a great example of this I will show you now. As you can see, the blue car is positioned just a little bit differently in both versions of the video. It's not a lot, but if you're trying to go right next to someone, it's enough to ruin your day. Also, when you see people flash in the replay, where it goes to a black screen and then comes back to them on track and then black screen, that's the server not knowing where they are. And so since it doesn't have any data, it doesn't have anything to send to you, so it just shows you a black screen, and that's usually in the race where you would see them blink away. I'm apparently really getting my money's worth reusing the replay from this race. Here's an example of what I'm talking about with the car blacking out. On the top, the replay is following him, and on the bottom, it's in my car. This will show you that from my view, he blinks out, but when following him, it actually goes black. As soon as we have data again, he shows back up. While we're here, you may have noticed that a lot of these options on the replay page under performance look like the same options as on the graphics tab. As just a note for comparison, a little bit more options on this tab than this tab. The two tabs are so you can set the replay graphics to be different than from when you are actually racing. This is because when you're racing, you may choose to lower some of the graphic settings because it's more important to have a higher frame rate. But when you actually want to see the replay, you want to see all the eye candy on. I made this video a little bit earlier, but this should give you a good example of when the two different modes kick in. They are dynamic and will switch between them during a single session. So here you can see my normal graphic settings, and the important thing to look at is how the objects are set to high. However, in the replay settings, I have objects set to off. So now when I get into the car, and if you look in the distance, you can see there's a tower and tents out there. However, the second we get out of the car, it instantly switches to the replay settings, and the tower and tents are gone because we have objects turned to off. Now that we have a replay file saved, how do we load it or view someone else's replay? For this, we need to go to the iRacing member site. From there, we go to Results and Stats, My Replays. On this page, simply click on the file name of the replay you want to load. The file name will also have a green arrow next to it. On this page, you can also delete replays by clicking on the red X, and then choosing yes or no. One of the annoying things about this is that you can't just click off to make this dialog go away. You have to click on yes or no to dismiss it. So let's delete this, and you can see what happens, and it's gone. For a couple of quick notes about this page, you need to be on the same computer that has the replay files on it, in the Documents iRacing Replay folder, and the iRacing Windows Helper service needs to be running. If you're on the same machine you race on, don't worry, it's there and it should already be running. The replay files need to be on the computer you're browsing from because even though it looks like it's coming from iRacing's web server, the helper service is what's actually reading the list from your local computer and passing it to the web page. I won't go into specifics how this works. I wanted to just give you all a high-level overview about how this works in case you ever have problems or are not sure why your replays are not showing up for you. This also means that the replays are not for your account, and you won't be able to see them from a different machine without copying the files to that machine. But real quickly, the important parts of this page are the search options, the online and testing replays tabs, the reset button, and the directory selector. I won't go over the search options here since they should be pretty straightforward, and I'm sure y'all are familiar with how to set some drop-down boxes. So let's talk about online versus testing replays. Online is anytime you join a session that there are other cars in. A race, open practice, league session, hosted session, anything like that. Testing replays are anytime you do offline testing, which you get to by going here to test and then test the car on track. Then you'll be offline by yourself. The reset button itself is more than just a reset button. It actually does two different things. It not only resets the options, it also refreshes the list here. So if we were to go rename a file right quick, like this one, which was the clip we made, call it testpad clip. Then when we come over here, you can either refresh the whole page or just hit the reset button and it'll just refresh the files in there. Hitting the reset button is a little bit quicker. You may have noticed not all my files are in one directory. iRacing does a good job of making it so you can organize your replays by allowing you to put them into subdirectories and then filter by the subdirectory. It does support multiple levels deep, however there's a catch. So you'll notice here I have this offline directory. And then over here, you'll also notice I have an offline directory. If I click on that, it'll just show me the 2 replays I have in that directory. And then we go over here and look in there, and there's a subdirectory. Why isn't that subdirectory shown here though? One of the quirks of the way iRacing does the subdirectory handling is it will only show you a subdirectory here if it also contains a replay file in it. So if we look here, we can see that it's in 2 more directories deep. If we go look here, we have the empty subdirectory, which is why it's not showing us anything. But then we click on that one and it's still there. And there's the replay, which is what matches here in the file name. Not sure why they chose to do it that way, but let's go look over at online replays right quick and I can show you that it goes fairly deep. If we click on that, you can see that we still have more a little bit deeper. So then we can click on season 4, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and there we go. I don't know what the actual limit is. It'll probably go for a decent number of iterations, more so than you'd probably ever need. Notice I'm hedging my bets there with my wording, because I know some people can go into some pretty deep and extensive sorting systems. But from there, let's go load a race. So when you first load into a replay, it will start at either when you join the session or when the clip start point was set. Normally this will probably be in warm-up if it's a race session. And if you look at the laps page, it will only show you the warm-up part of the session, which is kind of odd. I don't know why they did it this way. But what you can do is you can either hit Control and numpad 6 to advance the session, or just simply click this button here, and then you'll be able to see the other parts of the session. If the session was an attached single qualifier session, you will only be able to see your own laps from qual, and you won't be able to look at anyone else's laps. For the same reason that adjusting the number of cars, you can't then make up the cars because the server never sent you the data, so you never saved it in the replay, so there's nothing to see. If you spectated the session, and that's where you save the replay from, then the server would have sent you everyone's qualifying laps, and you would actually then be able to go look through each person's different qualifying laps. Alright, now that we have a replay loaded, we've gone and made it to where we can see all the different parts of the session. How do we control playback and whatnot? There's a couple of different pages on iRacing's website that will give you the full list of playback controls. I'll put all the links to the various pages in the description down below. For this video, I'm not going to go into every control and what all they do, since I'd like this video to finish sometime today. I recommend, if you really want to get deep and dirty with some of this, that you load up a replay and just look at the controls and mess with each one individually and see what they do. Why don't we go back to lap 1 by double clicking on the first lap in the lap list, and then let's go look at what it looks like when we start a replay from the cockpit. So when we start playback, the first thing you will notice is what's lacking or what's missing. And I'll hide the UI with space bar real quick and bring it back. So the first thing to notice is there is no black box and there's no virtual mirror. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to turn them on either. The black box, I might understand why they aren't able to bring that one back, but the virtual mirror, I mean, they have the mirrors are working, so why can't they have the virtual mirror? I don't know, it's just one of those funny things. However, if you're trying to record playback and want to show the virtual mirror, the way I do it, for the few times I've needed to do this, I create a new camera and then have it flip around and position it to where I think the virtual camera should be and set the FOV to roughly match. And then record the whole race. Yeah, it really sucks. Pro tip if you do this, do not forget to mirror the video in your editing so that the mirror actually looks like a mirror and is not a window that looks backwards and incorrect to everyone watching it, because it will confuse them. No sir, I've never done that. I'm a professional. If you want to simulate the black boxes, like specifically the relative box, you're going to have to use something like Joel Real Timing, which will allow you to get that information back from a replay. So you noticed when we first loaded the replay, it was already playing. To pause the replay, you can simply click the button here, which would be like this, and then pause it, or hit number pad 5 to play and pause the video, which is useful when you're in this mode, and you'll notice there's no mouse. See, mouse, no mouse, mouse, no mouse. So you can hope you just leave it there and then never move your mouse when you go to click, or you can just hit the numpad 5 key. And they actually laid out most of the controls really well. Getting used to using the hotkeys, especially like the number pad keys, will make your life a lot easier when trying to move around in the replays. Now let's say you want to jump to a particular driver. You can do this in one of several ways. You can either click on the Entries tab and then click their name, or using the Results tab and also double-clicking on their name. You can also just click on the helmet here and then select the driver you want, as well as using these buttons here to jump forward and backwards, and then the V and Shift V key to go to the next driver for V, and the previous driver for Shift V. Both the buttons and the hotkeys go by the next car relative to the current car on track. As well as actually selecting which driver you want, there's also a few automatic director modes from this list. There's focus on crashes, focus on leader, most exciting. Let's try focus on crashes. Let's switch real quick to the chase view, since that one makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on. And we'll fast forward. And as you can see, it's kind of just bouncing around. I don't know exactly what algorithm it uses to figure out which car to switch to. And let's disable voice chat on replay, which is what this button does. It has some algorithm it uses, and I don't know what it is exactly. As you can also see, it's not always perfect, because it kind of missed this incident, or it just barely caught the last bit of it. If you find it, you can do it and then rewind a bit. And it sounds like there were some secondaries that happened back there that we missed. So as you can see, while it's not perfect, it'll get you in the ballpark if you're just looking for certain specific things. I can't really tell you exactly what the difference between focus on crashes and most exciting is, since it often will show very similar things, so I don't think it's very different. Now, I've kind of already started doing this before I covered it. Switching cameras can be done either with these arrows, or selecting which camera group you want like this, or using the C and Shift C key to go forward and backwards. The next camera and previous camera and these buttons will go in the order the camera groups are listed here. Some of you may have noticed I have referred to these as camera groups and not cameras. That's because these are groups of cameras and not just a single camera. Granted, most of these groups have only one camera in them, but certain ones like TV 1 through 3 and Scenic do all have multiple cameras in them. Or the camera groups that don't have any cameras with specific settings to force what they look at and when, which is a deeper topic I will not be going into on this video because that gets into the camera rabbit hole, which is an entire video on its own. For ones like Scenic, you can go through the cameras in the group pressing B and Shift B again to go forward and back. And apparently this does not have a camera where all the action is right now. It's kind of funny. I guess it's not very scenic looking there. A couple of important notes about this though. There are certain conditions when it still won't let you go between the different cameras in the group, even though it will automatically be jumping through those cameras. And if you see these buttons disabled like this, as you can see here, they are disabled and we cannot use them, and hitting B doesn't do anything. But yet, if I let it play, it does bounce between them. Yep. Let's talk about creating and editing cameras. Like I previously mentioned, this is a fairly in-depth subject on its own that's a bit outside of the scope. I'll be doing a high-level overview that may be useful for most people and just kind of looking at replays and wanting to get a very specific angle or view for that. I'm not planning on doing an in-depth camera video. However, if there's enough demand, I'd be happy to do one. If anyone has any documentation on cameras in this sim, I would love a copy of it, since most of all that I know about cameras has been kind of doing it on the fly and messing with stuff and whatnot. Anyways, let's get started with editing of a camera. Let's go to a good static camera, since those will have the least amount of restrictions on them and what you can do with them. First thing you'll do is hit Control F12, which will put the sim into camera edit mode. Now, when you're in this mode, your keys will change. Basic movement will be done with WASD, W for forward, S for back, A for left, D for right. And then you can use modifiers on that. Alt W and S for up and down, Alt A and D for roll left, roll right, and then Control for your pitch and yaw. Control W pitches up, Control S pitches down, Control A yaws left, Control D yaws right. And while you notice that the movement is slow at first, there's an acceleration added when this option here is set so that it eventually speeds up and gets to a reasonable speed as long as you keep holding the button, which also means if you hit Alt and S, then you start going down at that acceleration. As long as you're holding a direction button at that time, it'll maintain the velocity and you won't have to re-accelerate. But if you let go, it starts over again. If you're not a fan of this motion, you can simply turn it off by unselecting that, and then you have just a constant speed. And unfortunately, there's no modifier button that'll make you move faster or slower. Normally in a lot of these type of interfaces, you can hold shift and it'll make you move either 10 times faster, 10 times slower. Unfortunately, this doesn't have that. What it has is use key times 10. And what that does is, so you'll notice we're moving, then we click it and we're moving 10 times faster. Uncheck it and we stop moving 10 times faster. It's weird because it's a toggle and not a modifier key like it would normally be. So, I mean, that's just how that works. And when you have both, you can get to some fairly decent speeds, which is useful for those times you want to get around Nords or Le Mans. Also useful is writing down the numbers of certain corners so you can jump to there to get you close relative to where you want to be. Another very important feature of this is while you're in camera edit mode, if you hit Control Z, you'll notice the mouse disappeared, you get into Freelook or Mouselook mode. And let's disable this real quick. In this mode, you can use left click to go forward, right click to go back, and all your other normal movement keys still work at the same time. So you can actually go just a little bit quicker than if you just use one at a time. As you can see, when I left click, it kind of speeds up just a bit. And the other thing is doing that will also maintain the acceleration that you have. As you'll notice that I'm not having to then re-speed up, because it's still maintaining the acceleration that I had at the end. Hit Control Z again and you exit Mouselook mode. Some of the quirks real quick about this interface. If you try to switch cameras using the normal interface to switch cameras, you'll notice nothing is happening. If I go to TV1, close the interface, and then change the cameras, it will actually change to the camera that it should have changed to. And while you're flying around, you can enable and disable the UI like you normally would. So let's talk about using Freelook or movement on cameras like the Chase camera. trying to edit the pitch roll yaw from using Control Z doesn't work here. You'll notice as I do this and hit Control Z, it pops right back to the car. That's because these cameras have an aim type set to at car. That's why I usually use one of the pit lane cameras, because those are set static with aim at fixed. Now, as a note, when you edit one of the cameras, like this chase camera, if I want to move it kind of over here, until I exit the sim and restart, that is its new camera position until it's reset. How do you reset that if you don't want to have to exit the sim and restart? That is where load track and load car come into play. So the way I keep it straight to kind of differentiate the two is I think about load car as car specific cameras. Those cameras would be like the nose, gearbox, roll bar, left suspension, front suspension, essentially the cameras that are going to depend on the shape and size of the car. The track cameras are all the other cameras that are not car cameras, which makes it very clear and easy to understand, right? Let's go reset our chase camera that we modified earlier. Since it's not a car specific camera, we just say load track, load default. Of course, since we're on the camera, it's not going to do it, so we need to go away and come back, and there we go. Let me show that a little bit better. So we can do that. Let's go to a different camera, load track, load default. Close this, and then when we go back, we're back to where we should be by default. That's all I have for this video, and I hope you were able to learn something from this. I know I didn't quite cover everything, but this should be a comprehensive enough guide to where you at least know where to go and where to start and kind of what to mess with if you have any questions or don't understand how certain things work. I will try to answer any questions y'all may have. Please don't hesitate to ask. With that, if you like, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. If you have any questions, suggestions, feedback, or advice, drop it in the box below. Good luck in your races, and y'all take it easy.